You know, I like homes of the future. I talked about the Microsoft home of the future, the second Microsoft home of the future, the third. Show me what life will be like in a few decades, all the gadgets and gizmos that come with it, and I'll be happy. So, of course, I was going to have to talk about this, possibly the most famous of these futurist exhibits, the Monsanto plastic home of the future, located at Disneyland. If you don't know, Monsanto is a beloved corporation with unquestioned ethics and moral fortitude. In Disney, they're Disney. In the mid-20th century, Monsanto was one of the largest chemical producers on the planet. They made a lot of things, and one of those things was plastics. See, around this time, plastic was something of a wonder material. It was cheap, it could be molded into anything, used in everything from clothes to packaging to this. Now, plastic itself isn't a material, it's many materials, and for the sake of simplicity, let's just think of it as man-made cheap stuff. You'd hear about new kinds of plastics doing amazing things all the time. There was nothing it couldn't do. And Monsanto, being one of the largest plastic manufacturers in the States, had quite a bit of incentive to find new ways to implement plastic into our lives. So in 1953, they approached MIT and teamed up for a research project that would look into the viability of plastics in construction. This resulted in a study called Plastics in Housing, which in turn inspired Monsanto to look into the possibility of a home that was made entirely of plastic. Or mostly made of plastic. This could be quite lucrative. After all, this was the post-war boom, suburbs popping up left and right, the era of Levitt towns and whatnot. This technology could change the world. A new era of affordable homes that were cheap to produce, easy to clean, and conveniently made with materials provided by Monsanto. They wanted to make a full-scale model, something that would prove the viability of this concept. But they needed a place to show it off, to get the general public to say, hey, I like plastic. I want to buy more plastic. I want to live inside plastic. And there's no better place to get people to say those words than Disneyland. Now, Monsanto and Disney already had a working relationship. The company had sponsored the cult classic Monsanto Hall of Chemistry attraction at Tomorrowland. Disney needed new things to do at the park, and this idea aligned perfectly with Tomorrowland's overall themes. The house would need to be designed as both a realistic home and a walk-through showcase, but it also needed to show off plastic's abilities as a moldable material. So it was going to be kind of curvy. It would be modular, consisting of 16 plastic shells that would be assembled on site. 4 rooms would sprout off the center, linking to the kitchen that sat on top of concrete base. Any renovations or add-ons to the building would be simple. You would shove more pieces on, probably like a Lego. It was a revolutionary new way to design homes, and who knows, maybe it would take off. You would get 1,024 square feet of walking space and 256 square feet for the utility room that was located in the base. Almost everything was made of plastic. The floors were vinyl, the furniture consisting of some synthetic fibers and foamy stuffs. The attraction would open in 1957 and would be quite popular. See, at this point, many rides at Disneyland would cost additional money on top of the admission price, but this was free. The house was intended to be the standard home for the future year of 1986, and so inside you would find the fantastical machines that would define the 1980s.
Would I like it? What a dream. Imagine how wonderful it would be to live in a house like this.
In this home, every cabinet is retractable. The refrigerator no longer exists, and instead is just one of the cooling cabinets. The sinks move up and down. Everything moves in the future.
A dishwasher, of course, but this one unlike any other. Washing is by ultrasonic waves. And the dishwasher is also the storage place for dishes. Plastic dishes, of course.
Cooking is done with atomic microwaves, which, yeah, I'll give you that one. Microwaves weren't unheard of for cooking in 1957, but they were massive and very expensive. The first consumer-grade microwave launched 2 years prior to the house's opening, but it cost the modern equivalent of about $14,000.
Yes, this kitchen almost gets dinner itself, but that wouldn't really be fun. The fun is making the most of the ultimate in kitchen convenience and efficiency. A dream of the future brought to reality by Monsanto.
This home featured lights that you could dim. How cool. The living room had a flat-screen TV. Looking at the pamphlets, it appears they called this an observoscope. It's not a great name. The family room has a communication center that allows you to buy groceries remotely. Yes, it's a computer. And while 1980s might be a bit early for online shopping, it's still a nice try. Something that might not catch too much attention nowadays is the push-button telephone with the hands-free speaker. The rotary was the standard in the 1950s and would be for a while after. It wasn't until 1963 that the first push-button phone hit the market and would take decades to become the norm. At the same time, we have a calling and camera doorbell system. One-way video so you can see who's at the front door. Well, I don't think that was too common by the 80s. A for effort. The bathroom would have an electric razor and an electric toothbrush, which is not too crazy, but it was built into the home itself for some reason. Maybe it was so people wouldn't try and steal it. The climate controls are much like every other home of the future, centralized at one location. Each room can have its own temperature setting, which I don't really know how that works if each room is connected to the other and it's a very small house, but whatever. Far stranger is how you can control the smell of each room, like the scent. There's just something about the 50s and smells. They couldn't get enough of them. Anyway, the attraction was a hit. Millions of people poured into the house to get a glimpse of the future that would probably come around someday. But there's going to be a few issues. When you design a home that tries to be cutting edge, it's only a matter of time before it's just the norm. Eventually, the future comes. The house looked very much of its time, a 1950s perspective on what the future might hold. And as the years went on, just a few years actually, it started to appear a bit more dated. Something like the microwave was soon no longer a futuristic machine. I mean, it was available to the general public, it was just kind of expensive. Electric toothbrushes, which were cutting edge in 1957, were on sale in America by 1960. Same with rechargeable electric razors. By 1963, push-button dial phones were commercially available in select locations, and while in the late 50s ultrasonic dishwashers were a promising concept for the future, it was becoming clear that this was primarily geared towards commercial uses. There were slight renovations to make it feel more up-to-date, but these were mostly cosmetic. It would be in 1967 that the home was closed forever. Demolition was apparently quite a challenge as the home just wouldn't break. I don't know how much of this is urban legend, but reportedly it deflected the attacks of an oncoming wrecking ball. But the core concept, the plastic home, that was still fairly futuristic, right? Well, over the course of the 60s, we would see something of a golden age for plastic living. Different models and concepts for homes that people would actually live in. Most famous of these is probably the Futuro, which was designed in Finland as a ski lodge, and it made its way across the globe being repurposed as just houses. But of course today, most people do not live in plastic homes, so obviously there is a few issues with the whole idea. Now, I don't pretend to be an expert on plastic, and I'm definitely not an expert on plastic homes, and we could talk about the structural support of plastic over wood and metal or whatever, but it doesn't really matter. What killed the idea entirely was the oil crisis in the 1970s. Plastic relied heavily on crude oil and natural gas byproducts, and when prices rose, well, plastic became more expensive as well. Suddenly, the prospect of building a home using literal tons of plastic seemed like a bad idea.
Yes, this whole thing, the house itself, the furnishings in it, offer a challenging new experience to stimulate your imagination toward newer and better ways of building, furnishing, and using our living space.
It doesn't seem likely that we'll ever return to plastic homes. I mean, how do you recycle that? Just throw it in a dump? You turn it into a home for aquatic life? I don't think it was ever going to work out. But you know, that's the fun of it. The wacky plastic house from Monsanto, located in Disneyland. It wasn't the last attempt Disney had at a home of the future, but that's a video for another day. Maybe. Okay, video's over. Go watch my other channel if you want.
The worst is over. It's all downhill from here.